Welcome to the Astrology Show with your host, Kelly Fox. Each week, Kelly will give you access to the current transits that are a valuable tool which provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has through our sun sign. Understanding the current planetary influences each week can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. Sometimes events in your life may seem completely random, but there is a pattern to the order of these events, one set in motion in part by you and in part by the planets and stars in the sky and their influence on your life here on Earth. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, if you're going to get that promotion, move to a new city, or fall in love, tune in to the Astrology Show for guidance. It can help you anticipate problems before they occur, give you tools to cope with changes, and help you look forward to the wonderful days ahead. Kelly Fox is a professional astrologer and internet pioneer who launched astrology.com, one of the first and most successful astrology websites. Today, her passion lies with her new site, theastrologer.com, where she brings a modern-day approach to an ancient wisdom. Please join Kelly each week to learn more about how the planets can align for you.
Hi there, and welcome to the Astrology Show. I am your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. Thank you for joining me this week. This week's show is all about the planets this week and what they're doing. So the astro headline of the week, or headlines I should say, we had a full moon in Gemini yesterday, which was actually hooking into Neptune, and of course the dreaded Mercury retrograde, which is going on right now. Also this week, at the end of the week, we have warrior planet Mars moving into its favorite sign of Scorpio. So I'm going to cover that in the show and talk about how these energies are affecting us all and our signs. So on that note, let me take a step back, do it in chronological order, of course, and talk about the full moon in Gemini. Now, this is not just a regular ho-hum old full moon. This is a super moon. And we have a supermoon this month, and we have a supermoon, actually two supermoons next month. Next month, 1st of January, there's a super full moon in Cancer, which hooks into tons of other planets. So it's a really supercharged way to start 2018. And then, of course, on January 31st, we have a super duper lunar eclipse in Leo. Anyway, I'm getting really far ahead of myself. So taking a step back to now and this week, there's a full moon in Gemini. It's a super moon, and it's nearly 12 degrees Gemini, and it occurred yesterday, that's Sunday, at 7:47 a.m. Pacific time, which of course is 10:47 a.m. Eastern time. So this full moon, it's forming a T-square to Neptune, and I am going to cover that later on in the show and explain exactly what that means and which signs are being affected the most by this T-square from the full moon. But not only that, T-square is considered a major configuration. Now, this full moon in Gemini is creating another major configuration, which is also called a yod, or a finger of God. And so it's the full moon in Gemini forming a quincunx to Jupiter in Scorpio and Pluto in Capricorn. It's a little bit wide to Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, but it's still within range or within orb to create this major configuration that astrologers call a finger of God, or a yod, which is very, very fated, heavily karmic. Oh, and of course, not to mention this full moon. It's in Gemini, And Gemini's ruling planet is Mercury, and of course Mercury happens to be retrograde right now. So December's pretty action-packed with lots of influences and aspects, and it's definitely a mixed bag. But of course, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but of course the big news of December is Saturn, Lord of Karma, moving into its home sign of Capricorn, and that's December 19th. But of course, I'm going to cover that in 2 weeks. So tune in every week to find out where the planets are and how they're affecting you. And sometimes there's a lot more to say than other times in other weeks. So right now we've got this full moon in Gemini. It's creating a couple of major configurations. One is a yod, which is very unusual. It's a very unusual aspect. I will talk about exactly how to calculate a yod a little bit later on in the show. But right now, taking a step back, we're currently, the moon is no longer in, let me just take a look in my calendar just to double check here. The moon is in Cancer right now, so it's not even in Gemini anymore. It moved into Cancer this afternoon. So even though the moon's not in its sign of the full moon of Gemini, we are still under the effects of the full moon. Depending on where, of course, these influences or these aspects fall in your own chart, really makes all the difference. Yes, these planetary influences affect all of us, but in varying ways, in very different ways. For example, I'm talking about the full moon in Gemini. You might have been born at the time when the moon was in the sign of Gemini, so you would have a Gemini moon. So this full moon would be very potent for you, or even if you are a Gemini sun, or you have any other planets in Gemini, this will be affecting you. So typically with this Gemini full moon, the signs that it is affecting the most are the mutable signs. And the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So those 4 signs in particular, or anybody that has planets in the mutable signs, will be affected by this full moon. And also, of course, Mercury retrograde is the ruler of this full moon, and Mercury is currently in Sagittarius, which is a mutable sign. So that's big news for the mutable signs. So be prepared, and I will talk a little bit later about Mercury retrograde as well, which I always feel like I'm harping on about all the time. Mercury retrograde happens 3 times a year for about 3 weeks each time. But, if that's not enough, there's something called like the shadow of the Mercury retrograde period, which means, about a week before, about a week after the Mercury retrograde, it's still got its tentacles wrapped around us. And again, depending on where any sort of planetary influence falls in your chart. And if you haven't had a chart, or you haven't had your chart read, or you've never seen your chart and you're curious, I strongly recommend getting your chart, because then you can follow along each week to see where these planetary influences are affecting you and what area of your life. Go to my website, theastrologer.com/chartwheel to get your free chart wheel. And then things will make perfect sense where you know where your Mars is or your Jupiter or whatever it is. Some people are born on a full moon. If you're one of those people that were born at the time of a full moons affect you most definitely, and that happens every month. Okay, so back to the Gemini full moon. Well, so a Gemini full moon is all about communication, and of course there's more of a challenge because of the Mercury retrograde at this time as well. But really it's like with the Gemini full moon, it's all about getting the message out there. It's important that we speak up and that we're heard, and that we're not just fixated or focused on one particular thing, that we've got a variety of things going on. And really at a time of a full moon, it's a time of projection. It's really about, it's sort of like a mirror, because if you think about the moon up in the sky, it's really big, and of course this super moon, the moon appears, it's sort of like an optical illusion, but it appears to be much bigger and much brighter when there's a supermoon. So think of the full moon in the sky as a mirror projecting or illuminating back at you is the best way to think about it. So it's like typically if you see people's behavior out there or people that are close to you, they're acting in a way that you don't quite like, that's sort of like time to acknowledge or time to own that behavior within yourself. And it's interesting because I have been seeing it a lot this past week, because full moons, the influence, and again, depending on where it sits and what planets it's hitting in your own chart, sometimes you can just feel the effects a week before or a week after. Typically, the applying influence, which means the build-up to it, more so than the influence after it, or the separating influence. But I've noticed this past week that two people, that they're sort of mirroring each other, but they're not quite understanding that they're sort of bouncing off each other, or behaviors are similar but can't really see it within. Sometimes it's hard, But take the full moon, every full moon, regardless of what sign it's in, but every full moon as a projection or as a mirror back to us. And I always find that when I do readings around the time of the full moon, I sort of get like a flow of people with similar charts or similar issues that they want to deal with. And then I always look at that as a mirror back to me as well. It's like, wow, I'm getting this influx of this group of people with certain issues, so I need to address that within myself, or at least understand it. So we're going to take a short break. After the break, I will continue with this week's planets, so stay tuned.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience in all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Hi, this is John Ondrasik of Five for Fighting, here for RAD, the entertainment industry's voice for road safety. You know, style is a personal thing, and your lifestyle is your business. But if you take it on the road, it becomes everybody's business. So please, plan ahead, designate before you celebrate. Friends, don't let friends drive drunk.
A public service announcement brought to you by RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
Hi there, welcome back to the Astrology Show. I am your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox, talking about the planets this week. And of course, the astro headline of the week is the full moon in Gemini, which is connected, unfortunately, into this Mercury retrograde, and also Neptune. So we've got Neptune forming some gnarly aspects into this full moon. And then we've got another major configuration here called a Yod, which I will talk about later, which is very fated and karmic. So in other words, the Gemini full moon is all about communication and how we communicate and making sure we get our message across. people, might be full of hot air at this time, especially with this T-square to Neptune. They might be fluffing themselves up, but really it might be no substance. It's all, I'm trying to think of that saying, all hot air and no substance or something like that. But, on the flip side, it's a very sociable time. Be careful not to take it overboard because of this T-square to Neptune, which basically means the sun and moon are forming a square to Neptune. And Neptune is the planet of things that are not really there. And people tend to overdo it. It's also the planet of drugs and alcohol. So it's like, be careful with this T-square of Gemini, the Gemini Full Moon. Gemini's very talkative and social. But when you've got that negative influence of Neptune coming in with this full moon, it's sort of like people just being a little bit out of control or not knowing when to stop, particularly because of this yod or finger of God between Jupiter, planet of excess, and Pluto, planet of transformation, and that's just putting it nicely. So there's a lot of factors going on at the moment. December is a really, really, really busy month astrologically. And then, of course, the other headline of the week is Mars moving into Scorpio. Now, with the full moon in Gemini, it's like people are very opinionated at this time as well. And that's because it's not only the Gemini full moon, but the moon opposes the sun or is opposite the sun. And the sun is currently in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, it's a great sign. All the signs are great signs, but there's always a flip side to all of the signs, or a shadow side. And the shadow side to the Sagittarian energy that we've got going on at the moment with not just the sun, but Mercury, and Mercury retrograde, of course, in Sagittarius, and Venus in Sagittarius, it's like people can be very opinionated, especially with this Jupiter in Scorpio. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. That's why I'm mentioning it and pulling it in. But it's sort of like we're inflated or we're coflated. There's this whole inflation of our own opinion or our own righteousness. And with these harder energies of the involvement of Neptune and the Mercury retrograde, it's a trying time. And as I said before, particularly for the mutable signs, and that's Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces, or anybody that has planets in the mutable signs. It's sort of like, be careful of not only other people's opinions and how factual are these opinions or information, but our own. We really have to take ownership of ourselves first and what's being said. But really, it's not all doom and gloom. This is great news for the air signs, and that's, I won't say Gemini because it's a bit of a mixed bag for Gemini at the moment, but Libra and Aquarius, not too bad, because anything intellectual with these air signs is good. It's sort of like connecting with others on an intellectual level, really finding common ground with other people. So it's sort of like at this time, the more you can get out there and socialize, the better. But again, don't overdo it because of the involvement from Neptune. It sort of like makes things a bit confusing or mixed messages, and that's just standard with the Mercury retrograde anyway. So again, about the full moon occurs every month, and each time it moves to the next sign, and then the cycle begins, the yearly cycle. But really, the full moon cycle is a 28-day cycle. It's part of the lunation or the phases of the moon, where it starts at the new moon. Then you've got the first quarter, the full moon, and then the third quarter. You've got these little other moon phases in between, which are like the secondary moon phases. But really, right now we're just coming out of the full moon phase. And then in 2 weeks' time, I'll be talking about the new moon, which occurs in Sagittarius. And actually, on that note, and I will save it for the show in 2 weeks, but I might be busy at that stage talking about Saturn in Capricorn. But the new moon on the 17th is in Sagittarius, but the thing is, it's at the 26th degree of Sagittarius, which is the black hole. So astrologers don't typically talk about black holes and and other secondary things out there, really, which talk about the planets and the planets moving through the signs and what that means. But there is a black hole that sits at about 26 degrees Sagittarius, and the new moon occurs right on that black hole. So that should be interesting. Tune in 2 weeks because I'll be talking about that as well. So back to the new moon in Gemini, which is the first headline of the week. So new moon in Gemini, it occurs every month. The moon does its full cycle every 28 days, and then it's opposite the sun. So in this case, we've got the moon opposite the sun. The moon's in Gemini, the sun's in Sagittarius. Both are forming this square to Neptune. And when you've got two planets in opposition and both forming a square to a third planet, that's called a T-square. And a T-square is a major configuration. So there's all different major configurations. Another one that we've got going on with this full moon is something called a yod. So the full moon in Gemini. Gemini is a sign. It's the third sign of the zodiac. It's symbolized by the twins. It's a mutable air sign, which means that it's quite flexible. It's intellectual. If you are fortunate enough to have any Geminis in your life, then you'll know that they're witty, they're clever, they're funny. They've got the energy of two people because their symbol is the twins. They're a bit devious sometimes. Gemini is one of those signs where it's misunderstood. It's not understood by a lot of other signs, and its ruling planet Mercury is retrograde right now. That is not helping the case for Gemini at all. So if at the moment you've got, let me think about how to say this. If you've got a low tolerance level for any Geminis in your life, just have a little bit of sympathy because, their ruling planet's retrograde. What can I say? It's just in their defense. So anyway, so Gemini, what turns them on is really connecting with someone on an intellectual level. So when you've got this influence of the full moon in Gemini, it's all about connecting with others at that cerebral, intellectual level. That's what's really, really important for this sign. They're very funny, they're witty, as I said, they're social, they love going out, they like meeting interesting people, they like connecting with people. I'm just thinking about the Geminis that I've known in my life, and they just, you'd be walking down the street and they say hello to everybody on the street, and people, the reaction to people, it's probably a mixed bag. Gemini does have a little bit of a reputation for being two-faced because they're the sign of the twins. They can just be indecisive. So I think indecisive, they're hot and cold, I guess. Wishy-washy, maybe changing their minds. They're a mutable sign. So a bit flighty sometimes, and I think that's why people don't understand them. Gemini, or at this time under the Gemini full moon, it's a great time for writing or journaling or blogging, and as I said, communication, reaching out to others, being very social. And it doesn't always have to be with words. It can be like with any sort of form of communication. Nowadays, images, photographs are really popular. That's a way to communicate or give a message out there. So Mercury is the ruler of this full moon, and, Mercury is currently in retrograde, and it's the opposite. It's in retrograde in Sagittarius, which is the opposite sign to the full moon. So basically this Mercury retrograde is forming a conjunction, or it's sitting next to, or not next to because it's a little bit off, it's about 10 degrees off. It's close to the sun in Sagittarius. So you've got typically when you have the sun and Mercury sitting next to each other, it's really great for communication, for speech, for being heard, for getting the message out there. But because Mercury is retrograde and the sun and Mercury are sitting opposite this full moon, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It really is a bit of a mixed bag. And as I said, for the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces, the energies at the moment are definitely a bit of a mixed bag. So it's sort of like with Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius right now, it's like many of us might be feeling very righteous and our opinions are important, and it's sort of like try not to be ramming your opinions down people's throats because, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and sometimes, there is no right answer. It's just sort of like, be open. And, because it's a lot of mutable energy, I think a lot of people are open. But it's good with this influence to like listen to other people, and not come off as like a smarty pants, I think is one way to say it. Now, as I keep going on about this T-square to Neptune, so it's interesting because Neptune is the planet of, on one side it's the planet of glamour, and I don't want to say Hollywood anymore. I know I keep bringing that up on every show recently. I guess with the Jupiter in Scorpio, Jupiter is excess and Scorpio is unveiling the truth. So, we've got all this political and Hollywood scandal going on. And I know I say it every week, but it's like, it's only going to get bigger, and it has been getting bigger lately. So with Neptune, the involvement of this full moon with Neptune being the planet of, and I'm using negative keywords because it's a square, and a square in astrology is a tough or challenging influence. So that's why I'm using these negative keywords. So the full moon's forming a T-square, which is a double square to Neptune. Neptune's a planet of lies and deception, illusion, things that appear to be amazing and wonderful. Really, when you move back the curtain or you look a little bit beyond, it's sort of like there's something there that we really don't want to see or we don't want to look at. So that's what this full moon is doing right now. Okay, we're going to take a short break, so stay tuned. I'm going to continue with the planets this week.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
This is a test to find out if you know it all when it comes to children. Name one of the leading killers of U.S. children age 1 to 13. What's the best way to protect children in a car crash? At what age and size should a child start using a booster seat?
Don't assume you know it all when it comes to car seats for your child. Go to safercar.gov/the right seat and know for sure. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi there, this is Kelly Fox, and this is the astrology. That's Mercury retrograde. I couldn't even get my words out there. This is the astrology show, and I'm talking about the planets this week. And I am, yes, harping on about the full moon in Gemini because it's not just a regular ho-hum full moon. It's a supercharged super full moon forming a couple of major configurations. So just before the break, I was saying moon square Neptune, sun square Neptune of this full moon. The mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces. Just be careful, particularly when it comes to communication, because the ruler of this full moon is the Mercury retrograde. So the thing is, it's like, with the sun and moon both forming this square to Neptune, planet of illusion, or things that are not real or too good to be true is probably one way to put it. Try not to make any major decisions or business decisions or personal decisions or major decisions or anything that's going to affect you in a really big way. That's something to be very careful about. So it's like our perceptions are clouded at this moment. We're in a vulnerable position. Many of us we've got like escapist tendencies, as I said before, around Neptune. Oh, we're oversensitive. And the people that are like very intuitive or psychic, be really careful like what you're picking up at this time, because the messages might not only be confusing, but they might not be accurate. And I know that's hard to hear for some of us. And many of us might be misconstruing what other people are saying, or vice versa. People are not getting what we're saying. So it's important at this time to sort of avoid addictive substances, especially with this Gemini, Sag, full moon. The energy of Sagittarius, they're always like the life of the party. They're pushing boundaries. So it's just be careful, because there is a lot of this sort of energy going on at the moment. Also, with the Sun forming a square to Neptune, there might be some like spiritual angst at the moment where, as I said, it's sort of like we're channeling, but we're not protecting ourselves with the white light. You know, we're not sure what we're really bringing in, and there might be a lot of mixed, confusing messages out there. What else is here? With the Sun and Moon forming a square to Neptune, just picking up or being sponges at this time, but not being really sure like what's positive, what's negative with both the Sun and Moon forming this square to Neptune. I think as well, like even with dreams, if you get if you channel through dreams, you get your messages that way. Again, ask for protection. Remember the white light. So I've been talking a lot about the Yod. The Yod, or the finger of God, which is part of this full moon influence. And it's a rare major configuration. Now, a major configuration means that more than 2 planets are involved with an aspect. So it supercharges the normal aspects. So a normal aspect would be like Venus trine Mars. And so in this case, you'd not just have a trine, you'd have a grand fire trine, where you'd have 3 or more of different planets in the same element. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But in this case, I'm talking about a Yod, and a Yod is a very unusual major configuration. It doesn't happen very often. When I'm doing a reading and I see it in someone's chart, it's very unusual. So in this case, we've got the Gemini full moon, and it's forming a quincunx to Jupiter in Scorpio, and a quincunx, and I'm trying not to get too technical here, but quincunx means 2 or more planets are 150 degrees apart. So then you've got the Gemini full moon, there's a quincunx to it from Jupiter in Scorpio, and then you've also got another quincunx to the Gemini full moon. It's pretty wide, but it's from Pluto in Capricorn. I know it's confusing, and I'm trying not to get too technical with this, but then you've got Jupiter in Jupiter in Scorpio, Pluto in Capricorn, forming a sextile to each other. So that's how a Yod is made. So a Yod, it's a triangle, but not a perfect triangle. It's like I'm doing this with my fingers, but I don't know if that's making any sense at all. So it's like 2 planets forming a sextile. Both those planets in the sextile form a quincunx to the apex planet, which in this case is the Gemini full moon. So it's a big deal, in other words. It's a big deal, this elongated triangle. And it signifies karma, lessons to be learned. Maybe something needs to be given up to bring something new in. And that seems to be like the theme of the moment, or the theme of the year, really. I feel like I've been saying that a lot of times on each of these shows. Is it's all about change and transformation, especially if you're a fixed sign. That's been going on a lot for the fixed signs. But in this case, this Yod involves the fixed signs, the cardinal signs, and the mutable signs. So I guess that's everybody. So that's what this Yod, or finger of God, is about. Yes, it's wide from Pluto, but I'm still counting it. So it's about karmic obligation, I think would be the best way to put it. So it's like if you think about the energy separately, so you've got Jupiter in Scorpio, which is about unearthing the truth. Then you've got Pluto in Capricorn, which is like changing the structure of what has happened to what's happening in the future. It sort of like creates this timeline of past, present, future, and how there's cracking going on with things that we're used to, or things that have always been, and now something's changing subtly, but not so subtly. And then the Gemini full moon just brings it out into a talking point, I guess is one way to say it. So anyway, so this yod is pretty much a big deal because, you know, it's an unusual aspect. So breaking it down, you know, the Gemini moon is forming a quincunx to Jupiter. So it's sort of like be careful about overindulging, especially with the involvement of the square to Neptune. So it's sort of like be careful about the overindulging with the Gemini full moon to the Jupiter. And then, of course, you've got the Gemini moon forming a quincunx to Pluto and Capricorn. And so it's like just be careful about people working behind the scenes. So as I said, you know, with this involvement to Neptune, it's like don't believe everything that you hear or see because the Neptune is all about I want to say delusion, but that doesn't feel like it's the right word to say. So it's like with moon forming a quincunx to this Pluto as part of the yod, it's very, it's sort of like things going on behind the scenes, and you're not quite sure because of the square to Neptune. It's pretty heavy stuff, and it's very, tonight's show I feel like there's a lot of heavy sort of energy to talk about. It's like complicated emotions, and it goes against what the Gemini moon is all about, because the Gemini moon is very, it's very light and superficial in a lot of ways. But when you've got like this, these other heavy outer planetary energies coming in, it brings it down and it makes it like really, really intense. So on that note, how will this full supermoon be affecting your sign is really what everyone wants to know. So if you're an Aries, the full moon, the Gemini full moon has been sitting in your natural third house, and so that's all about communication. So communication, it's really, really important for you to definitely, you know, watch what you say and take everything with a grain of salt, I guess is one way to say it. If you're a Taurus, this full moon for you highlights spending and saving money and possessions. If you are a Gemini, well, this is in your own sign, this moon. And so this full moon in your own sign is all about you. It's sort of like all eyes are on you at this time. And as I said at the beginning of the show, the full moon is sort of like a mirror. It's illuminating. Use that as the key word for a full moon. Use illumination or illuminating as the key word for any full moon. But if you're a Gemini, more so. It's sort of like the spotlight is on you. So with the Mercury retrograde, your ruling sign is moving backwards. Be really careful about what you say and how you communicate, because it will most likely be misconstrued in some way. If you are a Cancer, this full moon, what it's doing for you is pay attention to your dreams. Cancer is a water sign, and so naturally instinctive and intuitive. So it's sort of supercharged at this time with these other influences going on. If you're a Leo, the way that this Gemini supermoon is affecting you, it's about friends and acquaintances and the groups that you're part of, online, offline. It's also a time to make hopes and wishes known. It's like a time of manifestation, especially with a lot of other planetary influences going on. And of course, this month, December, is huge. It's just so much to talk about. If you're a Virgo, the focus for you with this Gemini full moon is about career. It's where are you going? What are your long-term plans, especially when Saturn starts moving into Capricorn? It's like, well, as a Virgo, you are quite methodical, you know, as an earth sign, and you like to know the path and where you're going and what's going on. And it's important for you, Virgo, about the detail. And right now, in the season that we're in, especially with the Gemini full moon opposite Sag and the other planets in Sag, Mercury retrograde in Sag, Venus in Sag, it's like, oh, poo-poo the details. But for you, Virgo, it's really, really important to know what the details are and to take a step-by-step approach when it comes to your career. If you're a Libra, anything around overseas, especially because this week is about wrapping things up, because Mars, warrior planet Mars, has been in your sign the past few weeks, and it's about to move into the next sign of Scorpio. So it's a time of endings for Libra. It's like putting plans into action, but you can't move forward until you complete something first, particularly if it's anything around legalities or anything overseas. It's important, or publishing, or any sort of higher education as well. If you're a Scorpio, then for you, this Gemini full moon is all about, it's sort of like, it's not just about money and possessions, but it's about bigger money, or, you know, usually we say this influence is about sex, death, and taxes. So it's like in anything to do with insurance or inheritance, this full moon will be illuminating those areas for you in life. If you're a Sagittarius, this is all about relationships. It's like you not versus, but you as an individual with independence, and what's the balance for you with your relationship, and where do you fit within your relationship? So it's sort of like freedom versus not having the freedom. So that's going to highlight, especially with the Mercury retrograde, which I feel like I keep bringing up nonstop. The Mercury retrograde is in your own sign at the moment. So in other words, it's issues coming to you from the past. And we're going to take a break on that note.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment, a philanthropic organization. Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Tune in to the Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and of course companionship. Now let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive, and now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance so common with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Hi there. Thanks for joining me. This is the Astrology Show, and I am your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox, talking about the planets this week. So I've been talking a lot about the Gemini full moon, and just before the break, I was talking about how this Gemini full moon affects your sign. And so Capricorn, the focus for you with this full moon is around your day-to-day routine, your health, your diet, your fitness, your pets, and anything to do with your job. And if you're an Aquarian, well, this Gemini full moon is illuminating your romance or your children or your creativity. So make the most of that. And finally, if you're a Pisces, the emphasis for you with this full moon is around home and family. And it might be trying to find, because just remember, the full moon, the sun and the moon are opposite each other. So it's like finding this balance between home life and career. So that's probably where the emphasis has been for you. Okay, moving right along. Also this week, the other headline of the week is warrior planet Mars moving into Scorpio on Saturday, and it will stay there through Saturday, January 20, no, wait, let me just check my calendar here. Something is not right. I know that warrior planet Mars is moving into Sagittarius on January 26th. Yes. And so warrior planet Mars will be in one of its very, very favorite signs of Scorpio. The other favorite sign is Aries until January 26th. So the big news here is when Mars is in Scorpio, this is all about willpower, determination, strength. But it's, again, everything has a shadow side or a flip side. It's about digging heels in at this time, especially for the fixed signs, once again. And the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So it's sort of like there's a butting of heads. But the good news is if you're a water sign, and that's Cancer and Pisces, of course, Scorpio, this is really nice energy for you. It's about getting stuff done, making stuff happen. It's like feeling like you're taking the steps, finally, the action steps to reach your goals. It's a really, really great energy if it flows really well, because it's one of the very, very strongest placements that you can have out of most of the placements. So Mars in Scorpio, moving into Scorpio on Saturday, and it really is about overcoming any obstacles or challenges. It's like sort of like breaking through the walls or busting down those big brick walls, just sort of like powering through anything that comes your way. It's like when Mars is in Scorpio, we've got the strength and the persistence to make stuff happen. And not just like superficial stuff, it's like deep and lasting changes. It's like I'm feeling really fierce. And I've mentioned in various shows that I collect a lot of images for each of these aspects. And the image that I have for Mars in Scorpio is like The Rock, and he's doing like these pull-ups. He's doing these pull-ups and the muscles in his arms, and he's just so determined to do it. And he's making it look easy, but of course, all the work that goes behind making it look easy. And the key word across the image is focus. So that's really when Mars is in Scorpio, until nearly the end of January. It's all about having the focus and the determination and the willpower just to bust through anything that is not working. But of course, as I just said, he's making it look easy. He's making it look like, oh yeah, I can just do like all these pull-ups and I was born with muscles like this, There's a lot of hidden motivation as well, because, that's the influence of Scorpio. Oh, and the other good news is, so when Mars moves into Scorpio, it's going to make some really incredible aspects to some other planets. So like the end of December, it's going to be forming a trine to Neptune. And then around like January 6th, it's going to form a conjunction with Jupiter. That's amazing. It's all about not only having the strength of will, but having it like turbocharged when Mars in Scorpio conjuncts Jupiter in Scorpio. And then a few days after that, it's forming, or they're both, Mars and Jupiter are both forming a sextile to Pluto. And it's like, wow, 2018 really starts off with this huge, incredible energy, because, we've got this supercharged full moon on the 1st, and then we've got Uranus planet of the unexpected and surprises, moving forward after months being retrograde in Aries. And then, around the 6th to the 10th, we've got this whole really testosterone-driven energy of Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto. It's like 2018 starts off in a really, really huge way. Now, again, as I keep saying, there's always a flip side for everything. So the flip side to this Mars in Scorpio is not only is it a powerhouse of influence and energy, but the flip side of it, and of course, every sign has a flip side. I'm not just picking on Scorpio. I wouldn't even dare even think to do that anyway. But, jealousy, possession, suspicion, Scorpio does have its tendencies to be a bit like that. So again, it all depends where this energy fits in your chart. So just a bit about Mars. Mars is the warrior planet. It's the planet of action, assertion, it's testosterone, it's sports, it's, I think, cars, it's the male, very masculine male sort of energy. And it's just how we get stuff done, I guess, is just an easy way to think of how to say it, describe the energy of Mars. I'm running out of time, and I want to get to the weekly horoscopes that I give you every week. So that's Mars in Scorpio, something to look forward to, really. And then the planetary influences this week, we've got the Mercury retrograde conjunct Saturn, which also happened last week because it was direct and now it's retrograde. So this is intense focus. And also Mercury is forming a sextile to Mars. Again, getting stuff done on a mental level, even though it's a Mercury retrograde. This is a great week to really focus, especially with Mars moving into Scorpio at the end of the week. And then, of course, we've got Mars forming a sextile to Saturn. Again, it's sort of like having directed energy, like we're on a path and we know where we're going, especially if the path and our goals are long-term. That's really the keynote. The key crucial elements here to all these energies is think long-term. Just keep thinking long-term, laying the foundation and the plans for long-term. Okay, I'm going to whiz through the weekly horoscopes really quick, but for more in-depth information about your sign and your horoscopes, daily, weekly, monthly, go to the OMTimes website. They have my daily, weekly, monthly horoscopes. So if you're an Aries, you might feel like there's too many people expecting too much from you and being too loud about it. Give yourself some space. If you're a Taurus, try not to spend too much money. Yours is one of the signs of money, but be careful and keep thinking about the long term. If you're a Gemini, well, this full moon is in your sign. So be yourself. Don't hide behind some mask that you might have been wearing. If you're a Cancer, full moon energy is all about the healing vibe, which I said, pay attention to your intuition and any sort of psychic ability and your dreams especially. If you're a Leo, live in the moment and appreciate what you have. Don't dwell on the past. If you're a Virgo, you might have to sell yourself, and don't be scared to do that. Sometimes Virgo can be a little bit timid, but now is not the time to do it, especially around your career. You've got to take that step and go for it, especially because Saturn is going to be moving into Capricorn soon, and that's going to be on your side because it's a fellow Earth sign. If you are a Libra, expect to find your maybe preconceptions and prejudice challenged, and maybe by something you see in the news or somebody you know. Life is not always black and white. If you're a Scorpio, clear out your clutter. So Scorpio likes to do that. Scorpio is a sign of regeneration and change. And if you're a Scorpio, you might have found throughout your life that your life has had many phases and stages. And so this might be a time for one of them, 2018. There's a lot going on in 2018 for the fixed signs. So maybe you're moving into a new chapter. So clear out the clutter and new chapter of life for 2018. If you're a Sag, So this is a week that might be majoring in romance and harmony. So it's sort of like maybe cut down on the social activities, which I know might be hard for you because Sagittarius is a very social sign. With all these planets in your sign, it might be a little bit hard, but maybe have a little bit of downtime. If you are a Capricorn, now the full moon might pile on the pressure at work and you may feel as though you're swimming against the tide and taking on much more than your fair share. But take note that your efforts will be noticed and maybe even applauded. If you're an Aquarius, the best plan for this week is to not have a plan. I know that's hard for a fixed sign, such as yourself, but hey, why not try it? There's a lot of mutable energy going on at this time, so it might be good just to go with the flow for a change. Might be difficult, but hey, because spur of the moment decisions are highlighted and finding the courage to say yes will be important. And finally, if you are a Pisces, get yourself out of the house as much as possible during this week. It might be getting a bit tense, the same old, same old. This mutable energy will help you do that. And that's it for me for this week. Thank you for joining me, and I wish you a great week. This is the Astrology Show, and I am Kelly Fox, your astrologer.